You can see everything. It's still tracking me. So if you're interested in doing makeup tutorials, something close up, I think it does a pretty good job. And it actually zooms in even more. If you bought that live, you bought that live. What is up, guys? It is Onye. And in today's video, I am going to be reviewing Canon's M50 camera. I am super excited about this video. One, because this is an awesome camera. And two, because this is the first video in a series that I'm calling beginner-friendly cameras for content creators. So one of the questions that I get all the time is, what is a good camera for beginners? Or what is a good entry-level camera? And so I wanted to put this series together so you guys have all the answers. That's enough of an intro. Let's hop right into it. I've actually talked about the Canon M50 before in a previous video. I'll link it here where I compared it to the G7X. What I love about this camera is that it's very compact. It can fit in my hand. And for the price point, I think about $600, possibly $700, it's a phenomenal camera. It delivers on photos and videos, but don't take my word for it. We're gonna hop right into the nitty gritty of this camera, and I'm gonna show you guys what I found out while I was out and about experimenting with it. So let's go.
Is just doing it for the money. And that's kind of one of those things that this is a creative platform where, yes, you can make money and you can make this a job. Like, there is a lot of potential in YouTube, but if you get started because you think you're going to get rich and famous off of being a YouTuber, then think again. This actually takes a lot of work, takes a lot of time. And for my first year of YouTubing, my first year, which I shot almost 200 videos, I made like 48.
All right, so the first thing we're gonna test out is autofocus. One of the most important features of a vlogging camera is that it be able to focus, right? Because when you're out and about and walking, you don't need the camera to be focusing on the trees back there, right? You need it front and center. So let's take a look at how this camera performs in terms of being on the go, moving around with the camera in hands. I don't have it on a tripod, it's in my hands. Let's see how it does. I can see on the screen where the focus is, and it's literally staying on my face no matter like what I do or what's going on. So that's pretty good. And this is without using a tripod to hold it. One thing to note about this camera is that it does have 4K video. So this is me shooting in 4K. As you can see, the video is a lot more cropped in, like it's a lot less background. So you don't have as much room to work with. And let me see how it works in terms of autofocus. It's actually moving in and out of focus from actually really looking at that. Right now it's not in focus. There we go. So it does struggle a little bit with autofocus in the 4K mode. So it doesn't seem to be a strong suit for this camera. I'm gonna try it with a different lens to see if that makes a difference. Please hold. This is 4K video with my 50mm lens on here. As you can see, it's way too cropped in. The 50mm on its own is super cropped in, but now in combination with 4K video, way too cropped. So you're definitely gonna need a zoom lens if you want to do the 4K on this camera. This one's not gonna cut it. No. I do also want to show you guys the difference between the lenses. So here I have my 50mm lens on the camera. As you can see, it's super sharp. Takes in a good amount of territory, and for those wondering, you can get your nice little bokeh pretty easily with the 50mm lens. Look how beautiful that is. Now here we are with the regular kit lens. It's all the way zoomed out right now, so you can see you take in a bit more area. You can zoom in as well, which I could not do with my 50mm because it is a prime lens. But it's not bad for a kit lens. Let's see what it does in terms of blurring out things. Honestly, it looks about the same. You get about the same amount of background blur, but keep in mind with this one, you have to zoom all the way in on this lens to get this blur. Because let me show you what happens when you zoom out. You get none of the blur. Very little. So as you can see, I am now in my bedroom. Now that we're inside, we're gonna look at things like the audio, the lenses, and some of the things we looked at outside, but I wanted to do them inside as well so that content creators can get a good idea of how this camera performs both inside and outside. First up, let's look at the audio. So right now I am using the on-camera mic, and this is pretty much what it sounds like. Now I'm gonna go ahead and put this mic on. This one is an off-camera mic by Rode. This one is pretty big because I use it for my DSLRs. I think it's bigger than the M50, but they sell smaller versions that I think will be better for this camera. I'll put a picture of that right here so you guys can see. Let's put this on. Let's see what it sounds like. All right, the mic is now on the camera. Let me make sure it's turned on. Excuse me. Yes, the mic is on, and this is what it sounds like. I won't know if there's a real difference until I actually get it on the computer, but hopefully you guys can see some sort of a difference. I imagine the sound is a little bit better with the mic on than it is with it off, but you guys be the judge. So next up, I'm gonna test out the different lenses. This one on the camera right now is the kit lens. It is a 15 to 45 millimeter lens with a 3.5 to 6.3 f-stop, if I'm reading that correctly. I think so. So it is a zoom lens, which means you can zoom in and zoom out using the lens. Right now I have the lens zoomed completely out to get more of my background. One thing to note, when the lens is zoomed completely out, you won't get as much background blur. In order to increase the amount of background blur, you're gonna wanna zoom all the way in with this lens. All right, we're about to get real close and personal right now, y'all. All right, so the closer you get with this lens, the more background blur you'll get. So this is a kit lens, y'all. As you can see, it does a pretty good job. I think it's still pretty sharp. You can see everything. It's still tracking me. So if you're interested in doing makeup tutorials, something close up, I think it does a pretty good job. And it actually zooms in even more. If you bought that live, you bought that live. I'm gonna go ahead and back out first of all. Back out, and then I'm gonna swap in my 50 millimeter lens so you guys can see how that looks on this camera. All right, so here is my 50 millimeter lens that I'm gonna swap onto this camera. It is the latest version of the 50 millimeter lens. Just one thing to note about the 50 millimeter lens is that it will not go directly on the M50. You do need an adapter, and this is what that looks like. Slide that on like that, and then you place this on the camera. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. All right, here we are with the 50 millimeter lens. I have not moved the tripod at all. This is what you get with the 50 millimeter lens when the tripod is in the same location as it was with the kit lens. So what I would do is like literally back this thing all the way up. All right, so I would back it up. You can go even further than this. Back it up to a place where I feel comfortable. But as you can see, get a good amount of background blur. If I wanted more blur, I would just need to distance myself from, I'm currently on my knees right now, but just trying to give you guys a good idea. I would just need to distance myself from the background. My room is not that big, so I'm not gonna get very much background blur. Let me see if I can back this up some more. So as you can see, the further away I get from the wall, the more background blur I get. This lens is probably more ideal if you have enough space to actually, get some distance between yourself and the camera and then yourself and the background. I strongly recommend investing in a second lens or a replacement lens to the kit lens, just so you get sharper footage, sharper pictures, and you can create that background blur. All right, let's talk about pictures. Let's talk about pictures, because if you buy a camera, all right, let's talk about picture quality. I don't know about you guys, but I want to make sure that any camera that I have can take a good selfie, right? So I did take a selfie with this camera and the kit lens, and here's what that looked like. It does a pretty good job. I only use natural lighting, so it gets a 2 thumbs for me for taking selfies. Another type of photo that is pretty popular for content creators are flatlays. So I wanted to see how this camera would perform. With these photos, I really wanted to test out the full scope of this camera, so I tried out different lighting, different presets on the camera. For this photo, I was looking at the bokeh. I wanted to see how good it performed when trying to blur the background. I think it did a pretty phenomenal job, and I'm going to show you guys a comparison between the kit lens and the 50 millimeter in terms of that background blur. Not bad, right? The camera also has presets, so you're able to go in and select background blur, which will emphasize blurring the background for you. It also has different color presets. So there's one called warm, there's one called cool, there's one called vivid. And when you select those presets, the camera actually applies that to your camera, and when you take the photo, those presets are added to your image. So as an example, I applied a warm filter here, soft filter here, You can see the difference. It's pretty awesome, especially if you're not into like photoshopping and editing your images. It's a really quick and fast way to do it within your camera. I also tested out different lighting. So I did lighting with a ring light, lighting with a strobe light. And that's one advantage of the M50 over something like the G7X. You can actually attach your strobe light to it if you're actually like really into product photography and want to use this camera for that. You do have that option. So as you can see, this camera is a beast, even when it comes to photography. I'm a photographer and I use the 70D and also the Canon 5D Mark III. And this one kind of represented for itself. Like I would actually pull this one out to use if I needed to because it produced really phenomenal photos. But you guys be the judge. Let me know in the comments below what you guys think of those photos. Let's get into the battery life. One thing that's been made abundantly clear to me is that the batteries do not last very long, like at all. They die pretty quickly, which kind of makes sense if you're using it for a vlogging camera. Like I was outside for at least an hour or so, and so if my camera is constantly in use recording video, which is I imagine is a big drain on battery, it makes sense. So my point is that you should get backup batteries. In terms of stabilization, I feel like this camera did pretty well in terms of making sure that there was no motion blur or anything crazy going on. I feel like it did a pretty good job of keeping my footage in focus and stable. On a final note, who is this camera good for? I think this camera is good for YouTubers, vloggers, and also content creators who are looking to invest in a better camera without breaking the bank. I wouldn't necessarily recommend this camera to someone that already has a DSLR or a mirrorless camera because there may be some overlap unless you're looking for something that's smaller size. Like for me personally, I have a Canon 70D. I also have a 5D Mark III. I know I have way too many cameras. So I didn't really need this camera. That's why I went with the G7X because it's a lot smaller. Where's that camera? Let me show you. The G7X is a lot smaller and I just needed something that I could literally throw in my pocket and go. And that's what this one was for me. The M50 is slightly bigger and it's not as portable as something like the G7X. But if it is your only camera or if you don't mind the slightly larger size, I think it is really a phenomenal camera. And one thing that it has over the G7X is that you can swap out the lens, which I think is one of the best features of this camera. I showed you guys what it looks like when I swapped in my 50mm. The 50mm is just a super sharp, affordable lens that everyone should own, much like this camera. I think if you are in the market for a new camera, this one gets 2 thumbs up from me. All right, that is it. I hope you guys found this video helpful. I think the next camera that I will be reviewing is actually the G7X. I mentioned earlier, I did do a comparison video between the M50 and the G7X. Be sure to check that out. But for the purpose of the series, I'm gonna take this one for a spin, the same way I did with the M50, so you guys can get a full 360 view of this camera. And if there's any camera that you guys want me to look into, I think I've gotten more and more naked as this video has progressed. And if there are any cameras out there that you guys want me to review next, please comment down below and let me know. And I will do my best to get my hands on it. And guys, do not forget to like, comment, subscribe, and also hit the notification bell so you guys are notified when I have new content dropping, which is going to be every week. Yeah. All right, until next time.